Ever been on a high mountain hike? As you climb higher and higher, you start breathing harder, right? Your lungs feel like they're working extra hard just to get enough air. Now imagine that feeling, but instead of climbing a mountain, you're in an airplane at 35,000 feet. Why does the cabin need to be pressurized when we fly so high up? Well, let me explain it this way. If you were to stand on top of Mount Everest without any special gear, your body would struggle to get enough oxygen. The air pressure is incredibly low at that altitude, and it's hard for your lungs to pull in the necessary amount of oxygen-rich air. Now, think about an airplane cabin at 35,000 feet, pretty much the same pressure as being on top of Mount Everest. If we didn't pressurize the cabin, our bodies would react just like they do on that mountain peak. Your lungs would struggle to get enough air. Breathing becomes hard and uncomfortable, and it can lead to some pretty serious health issues. So, just like how you might need a special suit or oxygen mask when climbing high mountains, airplanes pressurize their cabins so the air inside is similar to what we experience at a much lower altitude, about 8,000 feet. That's about as high as most of us have ever been in our lives. And here's the surprising part. By keeping the cabin pressure close to sea level, it makes flying more comfortable and safer for everyone on board. As we climb higher in our journey, let's zoom into how the plane handles those thin layers of atmosphere up there. When you step aboard a commercial airliner, it starts climbing rapidly off the ground. As it ascends, the air outside thins out and becomes much less dense, about 1/3 of what you'd experience on the ground. Now here's where the magic happens. Inside your plane, they're working like wizards to keep things comfortably pressurized. Imagine the cabin is a giant balloon, but instead of simply inflating it with air from outside, the plane actually creates an artificial atmosphere that mimics sea level pressure. This means the air you breathe feels just like walking down the street on a sunny day. And how do they pull this off? Well, there's a nifty little device called a ram air intake. As the plane moves through the air at high speed, the intake scoops in outside air. Then, it passes that air to another system that compresses it to match the pressure of the cabin. It's like having an incredibly powerful vacuum cleaner, sucking in fresh air and pumping it inside your aircraft. But wait, there's more. To keep everything balanced, the plane also has a bunch of automatic valves. They control how much outside air is let in or out, ensuring that the pressurization stays just right throughout the flight. It's like having an invisible hand adjusting the windows of a car to maintain a comfortable pressure inside. So why does all this matter? Well, it means you won't feel dizzy or lightheaded during your flight. The air won't be as dry, which is good news for your skin and throat. And even if the plane's pressurization system fails, don't worry. These are incredibly rare occurrences. The emergency oxygen mask will drop to ensure everyone has enough oxygen. Okay, so we've talked about why the cabin needs to be pressurized, but how does that actually happen? Imagine you're building a fortress, this time a pressure fortress. First, think of the plane as a giant metal tube flying through the sky. Now, on the outside, it's super cold and thin up there. But inside, we want the air to be nice and cozy. That's where our special features come in. The first step is an air intake system. This is like a big straw that sucks in air from the outside. Think of it as your airplane breathing, inhaling that fresh mountain air into its lungs. But here's the cool part most people don't know. The plane doesn't just suck in any old air. It does so at high speed to make sure we get lots of oxygen. Once inside, the air goes into a compression chamber. This is like your airplane's chest pressing down on that air, making it denser and more pressurized. Why do they call it compression? Because they're literally squishing the air molecules closer together, similar to how you squeeze a sponge, reducing the space between water drops. And now for the magic moment. This compressed air is then pushed into the cabin through distributing nozzles that spread it evenly around. It's like pouring a glass of water into many tiny cups all at once, making sure everyone gets their fair share of oxygen-rich air. That's how the plane builds its pressure fortress, using an intake system to suck in air, compressing it to increase the oxygen content, and then distributing that air evenly throughout the cabin. It's kind of like having a giant magical pillow that fills up with fresh air, making your flight comfortable even at high altitudes. So next time you feel cozy on board, Remember, all those fancy systems are just working hard to keep you breathing easy. Vocabulary: air intake system, compression chamber, distributing nozzles. Okay, here's a neat little experiment you can do at home. Imagine you have a big rubber balloon filled with air. Now, if you take that balloon outside on a really cold day, it starts to shrink, right? That's because there's less air around it, so the pressure inside is equalizing. Inside the cabin of an airplane, something similar happens as we go higher in altitude. When you're cruising at 35,000 feet, it's like being outside on that super cold day, except much higher up and colder than any winter. The air pressure outside the plane is incredibly low, which means there's a lot less air molecules available. This is why the cabin needs to be pressurized. It's like pumping more air into our rubber balloon. The plane uses its pressurization system, which is basically a giant forced air fan. Think of it as having a big straw that sucks in and blows out air all day long. This fan pulls in conditioned air from the engines or outside the plane and pushes it into the cabin. It's constantly working to maintain enough pressure inside, so everything feels normal, like you're at 8,000 feet instead of 35,000. And here's the surprising part. There are actually several stages of pressurization. The initial climb is a bit rough as the cabin slowly fills up with air. But once it settles in around 8,000 feet equivalent pressure altitude, things become pretty comfortable. That's why you might feel slightly stuffed when you eat on board. Your ears can't adapt to that quick change in pressure, just like if you were blowing into a balloon too fast. So, next time you're up high in the sky, remember, your plane is working hard to keep you inside a pressurized fortress of air. It's like having a big, invisible shield around you, making sure you can breathe easily and feel relaxed while flying thousands of feet above the ground. All right, so we've seen how the cabin gets pressurized, but why does this really matter? Isn't it just about making that flight feel more like home? Well, actually, pressurization isn't just about comfort. It's a key safety feature. At high altitudes, the air is incredibly thin, and breathing becomes difficult. Imagine walking up a mountain. As you go higher, the air gets thinner until eventually it's so thin that you can feel dizzy or even pass out. Now, let's think of our airplane cabin like a really big plastic bubble. This bubble keeps us safe by maintaining an atmosphere similar to sea level, where we're used to breathing normally. Without this pressurization, the air pressure outside would be so low that it could harm us in more ways than one. Here's how it works. The walls of our cabin bubble are actually the airplane hull. As the plane climbs higher, a special system called the outflow valve adjusts to keep the pressure inside the cabin constant. This means the air you breathe stays at about 15 psi, pounds per square inch, which is like being at sea level. That's why you can walk around normally, because your body isn't fighting against thin air. And what if something goes wrong with this bubble? If there's a breach in the hull, the outflow valve will quickly close to keep as much air inside as possible. This rapid pressurization is designed to buy time for the crew to fix the issue or prepare emergency oxygen supplies. It's like having an invisible safety net that ensures you stay safe even if things don't go perfectly. So, when you hear that little announcement about cabin pressure, remember, it's not just making your ears pop. It's a critical safety measure. The next time you fly, take a moment to appreciate how this small detail makes such a big difference in keeping us all healthy and safe up there in the clouds. So, remember, when you're up in the air on your next flight, the plane isn't just flying higher. It's also working hard to keep the cabin at a comfortable pressure. This ensures that everyone can breathe easily and stay safe. Now, why not subscribe and learn more about how planes work? We'll explore more fascinating aspects of aviation together.